For 60 years, shortwave radio connected America to the entire planet. A family in Ohio could twist a dial on their living room receiver and hear a live broadcast from London, Moscow, or Buenos Aires. Millions of listeners tuned in every single night. So why did the entire medium collapse in barely a decade? And why is Wall Street now quietly fighting over the exact same frequencies that mainstream broadcasters abandon? But this story doesn't start with the collapse. It starts with a mistake. In 1912, Congress passed the Radio Act, designed to bring order to the chaotic new world of wireless communication. Military and commercial operators controlled the valuable low frequencies. Amateur radio hobbyists were considered a nuisance, so lawmakers banished them above 1.5 megahertz. Frequencies the scientific establishment dismissed as useless electromagnetic wasteland. Nobody expected those signals to reach beyond a few local miles. By 1921, amateur operators organized through the American Radio Relay League proved everyone wrong. Using homemade equipment and a fraction of the power that commercial stations required, they bounced signals off the ionosphere and made contact across the Atlantic Ocean. The discovery that shortwave frequencies could refract off the upper atmosphere and travel thousands of miles triggered an immediate land grab by governments, militaries, and corporations. The spectrum that experts had dismissed as worthless was suddenly the most valuable real estate in telecommunications. Throughout the 1930s and 40s, affordable consumer radios with shortwave bands transformed the American living room into a window on the world. Families could bypass domestic programming entirely and tune directly into broadcasts from Europe, Latin America, and Asia. The hobby of DXing, listening to distant stations, became a genuine cultural phenomenon. Enthusiasts studied the ionosphere, tracked solar cycles, and navigated atmospheric interference to pull in foreign broadcasters half a world away. Listeners logged their reception using the SINPO code and mailed reports to international stations. In return, stations mailed back QSL verification cards, which became prize collectibles and physical proof of a listener's global reach. This was cultural exchange before the internet existed. Americans heard West African high-life music, Andean folk melodies, and geopolitical perspectives, completely absent from domestic radio. Nothing captured this era quite like the Zenith Trans-Oceanic, widely called the royalty of radios. Commander Eugene McDonald, Zenith's founder and an avid yachtsman, ordered his engineers to build a portable receiver tough enough to pull in international shortwave from the open ocean. The first model, the 7G605 Clipper, launched in January 1942 with a production run of exactly 35,000 units before wartime manufacturing restrictions shut the line down. Early units featured a sailboat etched into the speaker grill cloth. After Pearl Harbor, Zenith swapped the sailboat for a B-17 bomber. That design change tells you everything about how fast America's mood shifted in those months. The Trans-Oceanic line ran for 40 years, transitioning from heavy vacuum tube models to lighter solid-state transistor designs, and remained the gold standard for global listening until production finally ended in the early 1980s. And that wasn't even the part that changed the world. During World War II, the United States turned shortwave into a weapon of psychological warfare. The Voice of America launched its first German-language broadcast in February 1942, transmitting directly into occupied Europe. The Crosley Broadcasting Corporation built the Bethany Relay Station in Westchester, Ohio, completed in 1944 and housed in a striking Art Deco building. 6 massive 200-kilowatt transmitters pumped over 1 megawatt of raw radio frequency energy into a sprawling network of 27 antenna arrays, projecting American news deep into Europe, Africa, and South America. Adolf Hitler reportedly referred to the station operators as the Cincinnati Liars. When the Cold War settled in, shortwave became the primary tool for piercing the Iron Curtain. The Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, and Radio Liberty targeted audiences trapped behind Soviet censorship. Moscow responded with massive jamming transmitter networks designed to drown out Western frequencies through brute interference. To overpower the blockade, the Kennedy administration commissioned the Greenville Transmitting Station in North Carolina in 1963. The complex cost $23 million, covered over 6,000 acres, and produced 4.8 million watts of output. That is the equivalent power of 96 top-tier domestic AM stations running simultaneously. This decision seemed small at the time, buried in Cold War infrastructure budgets. It was not. Greenville doubled America's global shortwave reach overnight and ensured that millions of people living under authoritarian information controls had access to an independent news source. For a while, the shortwave world actually seemed untouchable. The global audience peaked between 1989 and 1990, right as the Berlin Wall came down. The BBC World Service alone estimated 120 million weekly listeners worldwide. In North America, shortwave remained the unfiltered window to the planet for anyone who wanted more than what domestic media offered. Then the Cold War ended. Without a global ideological standoff to justify the cost, Western governments started asking a very uncomfortable question. Why spend millions maintaining massive transmitter fields when the internet, satellite television, and local FM syndication all exist? The fatal blow landed on July 1st, 2001. The BBC World Service permanently cut all direct shortwave transmissions to North America, Australia, and New Zealand. The decision saved roughly £300,000 per year. Within a few years, Radio Netherlands, Deutsche Welle, Radio France Internationale, and dozens of other European broadcasters followed suit. The shortwave dial in North America, once packed with international voices broadcasting in dozens of languages, went almost silent. But the shortwave dial didn't stay empty for long. The people who filled it just weren't who anyone expected. As state broadcasters walked away from the spectrum, private religious networks rushed in to fill the vacuum. Stations like WBCQ in Maine, WWCR in Nashville, and WINB in Pennsylvania kept their transmitters warm by selling hourly airtime to religious ministries and fringe political commentators. The international journalism disappeared. The dial shifted heavily toward fundamentalist programming and alternative political discourse. The single biggest rescue in modern shortwave happened in December 2013. Family Radio's massive transmitter site in Okeechobee, Florida, a 660-acre complex with 14 high-power, water-cooled transmitters and 23 antennas, had gone completely dark in June after the organization's finances collapsed, following Harold Camping's failed Judgment Day predictions. The entire facility was at risk of being dismantled and sold for scrap metal. Jeff White, founder of Radio Miami International, purchased the whole complex and relocated his WRMI operation from Miami to Okeechobee, preserving the largest privately owned shortwave station in the Western Hemisphere. You'd think someone would have said something sooner about saving it. Nobody did. While private operators scrambled to keep the spectrum alive, the government's own shortwave network faced something far worse. In March 2025, an executive order directed the U.S. Agency for Global Media to slash the Voice of America down to its bare statutory minimum. The U.S. Agency for Global Media Deputy Chief Executive Officer Carrie Lake moved immediately. She cut Voice of America's wire service contracts with Reuters, the Associated Press, and Agence France-Presse overnight. On March 15th, she placed over 1,300 employees on administrative leave and terminated roughly 600 contractors in a single day. She canceled a 15-year headquarters lease and relocated the remaining skeleton staff to a NASA building with a single functional radio studio. A network that had broadcast continuously into hostile regimes since 1942 was effectively silenced. Federal Judge Royce Lamberth called the shutdown arbitrary and capricious. After a year of appeals, stays, and mass layoffs executed under contested legal authority, Lamberth delivered the decisive ruling in March 2026. He invalidated Carrie Lake's appointment entirely. Every layoff, every broadcasting suspension, every administrative action she had ordered carried no legal force. Over 1,000 Voice of America employees were ordered back to work. The agency survived its closest brush with extinction. Barely. And if that were the only twist in this story, Shortwave would just be a cautionary tale about government neglect. But the strangest chapter is still unfolding. The same ionosphere that amateur hobbyists accidentally discovered in 1921 is now worth billions to Wall Street. Fiber optic cables carry data as light through glass, but light moves about 30% slower through glass than through open air. Physical cables also zigzag across continents, crossing ocean floors and routing through digital switches, adding microscopic delays at every junction. A shortwave signal bounced off the ionosphere takes a far more direct atmospheric path, traveling at nearly the speed of light in a vacuum. For algorithmic trading firms moving billions between the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and European markets like Eurex, that fraction of a millisecond is worth enormous money. Since 2023, the Shortwave Modernization Coalition has been petitioning the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, for permanent authorization of long-distance data communications within the 2 to 25 megahertz band. Independent radio monitors have already documented these trading networks transmitting ultra-low latency data using specialized modulation at 24,000 baud and 48,000 baud. That is the kind of number that makes old radio engineers weep and laugh at the same time. A shortwave receiver built in the 1920s could technically tune into the exact frequencies now facilitating billions of dollars in automated microsecond stock trades. The NIST time station, WWV in Fort Collins, Colorado, has been ticking without interruption for over 80 years, transmitting precise time and frequency standards on shortwave. It still operates today. Canada's equivalent station, CHU, is scheduled to go permanently silent on June 22, 2026. The American Forces Network, which once ran hundreds of shortwave stations worldwide for deployed troops, is down to a handful of emergency backup transmitters. Shortwave radio lost its audience, its funding, and its golden age. It did not lose its physics. Signals still refract off the upper atmosphere, still cross oceans without cables, still reach populations living under regimes that have severed every internet connection and jammed every satellite feed. That physical resilience is why religious broadcasters kept the transmitters running in Florida, why a federal judge forced the Voice of America back on the air, and why Wall Street is spending millions to reclaim frequencies the rest of the world threw away. The spectrum endures because the ionosphere does not care who abandoned it. It just keeps reflecting.